I didn't collapse. I didn't burn out. I didn't hit rock bottom. That's what made it confusing. My life looked fine. I was good at what I did. People relied on me, trusted me, called me steady. I wore that word like armor. Steady meant useful. Steady meant safe. Steady meant I didn't ask for much. The realization came quietly, on a Tuesday. No dramatic trigger, no argument, no loss. Just a moment where I was sitting alone in my car after work, engine off, hands still on the wheel, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything sharp enough to call real. I wasn't sad. That was the problem. Everyone assumes sadness is the warning sign. It's not. Numbness is. I stayed in the car longer than usual. The dashboard lights dimmed automatically. I stared at my reflection in the windshield. Distorted, older than I felt inside. Or maybe exactly as old as I felt. I thought about how often people told me I was doing great. How rarely anyone asked how it felt. How rarely I asked myself. At home, the apartment was quiet in the way only familiar spaces get. Nothing wrong. Nothing missing. Nothing waiting. I dropped my keys on the counter, took off my jacket, sat down without turning on the lights. I knew where everything was. That comfort used to feel like success. Now it just felt rehearsed. I thought about the man I used to be. Not younger, just louder inside. The one who had opinions, who wanted things, who imagined futures instead of managing routines. I told myself this was maturity, that wanting less meant growing up. That calm was the reward for endurance. But calm isn't the same as alive. I knew that. I just avoided saying it out loud. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Her name alone shifted something in my chest. Not pain. Pressure. We hadn't ended badly. We'd ended quietly. Like adults, which usually means unfinished. Her message was simple. Open quote. Hey, I was in the neighborhood today and thought of you. I hope you're well. Close quote. I stared at it longer than necessary. I didn't know why it mattered. I just knew it did. I didn't answer right away. That's something I'd learned to do well. Delay. Delay decisions. Delay emotions. Delay honesty. I told myself I'd reply tomorrow, but tomorrow had become my favorite excuse. That night, lying in bed, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't afraid of losing what I had. I was afraid of admitting it wasn't enough anymore. And that was a harder thing to face. Because once you admit that, you have to decide what comes next. I told myself it was late, that I needed sleep, that there was no urgency. None of that was true. I replied the next morning. One sentence. Neutral. Safe. Open quote. Hey, yeah, I'm doing all right. Hope you are too. Close quote. I read it 3 times before sending, as if the words could betray me. Her reply came faster than I expected. That unsettled me. Open quote, I am. Didn't realize how long it had been until yesterday. Close quote. Neither did I. Time had a way of smoothing things over without actually resolving them. We didn't jump into the past. We circled it. Like people who know there's something fragile in the middle. She asked about work. I answered efficiently. I asked about her. She answered honestly, not enthusiastically, not guarded, balanced. That had always been her strength. We met 3 days later, not planned, not spontaneous either, just inevitable. Same cafe, different version of us. She looked the same in the ways that mattered, calmer, more grounded, less willing to shrink. That was new. I noticed the silence between us first, not awkward, heavy, full. I almost didn't text, she said, stirring her coffee slowly. I figured if you wanted to talk, you would have already. That landed, not cruel. Accurate. I thought about it, I said, which was also true, just incomplete. We talked about surface things, jobs, cities, people we used to know, but every sentence had an echo. Every pause asked a question we weren't answering. She watched me carefully, not suspicious, assessing, like she was checking if I was still the same man who never quite arrived emotionally. You seem quieter, she said finally. I almost laughed. I don't know if that's growth or exhaustion, I said. She smiled, not amused. Understanding. There was a moment. I could feel it before it happened. A small opening, the kind that disappears if you don't step into it. I didn't leave because I stopped caring, she said. I left because I got tired of waiting for you to choose me. There it was, calm, clear, unavoidable. I didn't defend myself. That was new too. I didn't know how to want things out loud, I said, and I didn't want to make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. She nodded. I know. That hurt more than anger would have. We sat there longer than necessary, neither of us rushing, neither of us pretending this was casual. When we stood to leave, she hesitated, just for a second. Then, are you happy? The word hung between us, simple, dangerous. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say something impressive and controlled. Instead, I said the truth. I don't know. She didn't respond right away. Then she said, that's at least honest. Outside, the air felt sharper, like something had shifted inside me. Not relief, not panic, awareness. As we walked in opposite directions, I realized something else. I wasn't tired because life was hard. I was tired because I'd been living carefully instead of fully. And now that I'd let something back in, I wasn't sure I could longer than necessary. No destination, no music, just the sound of my own steps and the city breathing around me. I replayed the question she'd asked. Are you happy? Not because I didn't have an answer, because I'd avoided needing one. At home, I didn't turn on the TV, didn't check my phone, didn't distract myself. I sat at the table and let the quiet stay uncomfortable. For years, I'd confused stability with fulfillment. I thought if nothing was broken, nothing needed fixing. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. That never happened. Not panic. Clarity. I wrote a list. Not goals. Not plans. Truths. I wrote, I am tired of being dependable but absent. I avoid wanting things because wanting feels risky. I've been protecting myself from disappointment by never fully showing up. Seeing it in ink made it real. Unavoidable. I didn't message her right away. This wasn't about chasing. It was about choosing. At work, I noticed how often I defaulted to fine, how quickly I minimized my own reactions, how practiced I was at staying neutral. That afternoon, my manager asked about a new role, more responsibility, more hours, more recognition. Old me would have said yes immediately. I asked for time to think. The silence on the other end surprised him. It surprised me too. That evening, I texted her. Not a confession, not an apology, an invitation. Open quote, would you want to get dinner this week? Not to revisit the past, just to be honest about the present. Close quote. She didn't answer right away. I didn't pace. I didn't overthink. I'd already done the hardest part. Her reply came an hour later. Open quote, yes, I'd like that. Close quote. I didn't feel relief. I felt responsibility and, strangely, readiness. That night, lying in bed, I realized something subtle but important. I wasn't choosing her over my life. I was choosing to be present in my life, whether she stayed in it or not. The outcome wasn't guaranteed. Nothing was fixed, but I was no longer hiding. The next morning, I emailed my manager. I declined the role, not dramatically, just clearly. I didn't know exactly what came next, but for the first time in years, I wasn't postponing myself. Some choices don't feel like breakthroughs. They feel like alignment. Quiet, firm, necessary. I didn't know how tired I was until I stopped, and I didn't know how alive I could feel until I chose differently.